It's the reason that carriers want broker transparency. It's the one thing that brokers can say that takes out any possible trust. It's the one thing that carriers hate to hear. That one thing, that's all I've got in it. Why do brokers say that? Buckle up. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to the channel. We're going to talk about freight negotiation again today, and we're going to narrow it down to the most despised thing that brokers can ever say. It's the one thing that makes you want to
buy them some flowers.
Why do they say it? Sometimes it's because they need
car washed,
but other times it's not as sinister as we all think it might be. So I've got the top 5. The one that makes you want to
buy them flowers
in there, but it's not number 1. So we're going to get to that. The number 1 is going to make your blood boil, because when you see how this works, and I know a lot of carriers don't understand this, but when you see how this works, it's going to tick you off. Because here's a little Easter egg. Carriers want transparency. Brokers aren't even transparent with themselves at times. And I'm going to show you on my TMS how that can be made to happen. So without further ado, I'm going to go down the list. We're going to talk about why they do it and how to disarm it and get past it. So here we go.
Number 5.
That's actually all they have in it. They underbid the lane. Maybe it's a long-term contract. They bid this when the market was weak. The market has picked up. The carriers are starting to take a little bigger cut of the pie, and they are making smaller margins, and that's actually all they have in it. I will say that over the past couple of years, and this is February of 2025, from mid-2022, when the market started to dip, until now, that is probably the least common reason, because broker margins have been higher, and it's been pretty well publicized that brokers are doing decent right now. That being said, the projections say, and it's just anybody with a crystal ball right now is making these predictions, but there might be light at the end of the tunnel, and rates might be going up sometime soon in the next few months, or sometime by the end of this year or next. Whatever the case may be, as rates go up, the broker margins will start to dip if they're on these long-term contracts. So let's say they have a load budgeted and target right now for $1,000, because that's actually all they have in it. So they bid the load for $1,000, and they've been moving it all year for $800 to $900. But now the market is starting to come up for trucks, and trucks are demanding $1,000 or $1,100. They only have the $1,000 in it. That's a them problem, not a you problem. You need to overcome that by asking a lot of questions, because if they underbid it, they are going to have to eat it. Yes, they might lose money. That's on them. Yes, they screwed up. That's on them. You're not in the business of doing favors. You're in the business of making money, just like everybody else that's in business. So you can make the choice on how to run it, but to determine if that's the case, you can ask some questions. One of the questions you might ask is, how long have you been working with this customer? And if they say, oh, this has been a long-term customer, we've been working with them for years. Well, that's a clue that this might be a long-term contract, and maybe they're locked in on a rate. There are pros and cons to that. If you want this lane and you're willing to do it at their rate, it might be okay for you to do that if it's the lane that works for you. But if it's a spot market move for you, and it doesn't make sense for you to do this on a regular basis, there's no reason for you to take it at that depressed rate. If the market has gone above what they have in it, they have to figure out how to rectify that situation. If they break even or lose money, that's on them. Generally, if it's a long-term contract, they have more than one load. Usually, as the freight market has the ebbs and flows throughout the day or throughout the week, they can make money on some, they might have to lose money on others. You obviously, if you're negotiating, you want to be the one that makes the money and makes them lose. I don't like to ever have a loser in a negotiation, but if they drop the ball and they underbid a lane, they might have to be a loser. It's your job in the negotiation to ascertain where they stand and figure out how to get the money out of them. So put your bid in, and we'll talk about how to bid some things later in another show, but put your bid in and get what you need. Maybe they'll come out of pocket for you, maybe not, but there are other loads out there.
Number 4.
That's their target budget. So maybe they have $1,000 in the load, but they are budgeting for $800. And they know that. So they don't want to come above that $800 because then you cut into their profit. So the other side of this, that's all I have in it, a lot of times they'll say, if I give you any more, I'm losing money. Well, they're not actually going in the red, losing money as far as coming out of pocket and not making any money on the load. They're losing money in that they're not making as much profit. They are losing because they're going over budget. Again, that might actually be all they have in it, like we said in number 5, but this case, it might just be what their budget is. Again, ask a lot of questions and figure it out. You can literally ask, is that all you have in it, or is this just your budget? A keen negotiator will look at things like time of day. If it's 9 a.m. and they say that, you could leave your offer, and at noon or 1 o'clock, if it still hasn't moved, they might call you back because, yeah, that's all they have in the budget, but now they're getting desperate to get it moved. And their budget, again, is not your problem. Call them out on it.
Number 3.
Very similar, but a little bit more out of the broker's control. And that's all the shipper has in the budget. The shipper might not have this load locked into this broker yet. A lot of times shippers will blast their loads out to 10, 15, 20 brokers. The first one with the lowest rate wins. Usually they will give a projection. So the shipper says, I need this in the ballpark of $1,000. Well, if you come at them at $1,200, $1,500, they're going to tell you they can't do it because that's more than they have in it. They know they can't win the bid. They can't get the load unless they come in at under $100 or under $1,000. So sometimes the shipper is waiting for them to come in with the lowest bid. That's their budget. There are 15, 20 brokers working on this. So one clue for this is if you see this load posted by multiple brokers, and especially certain industries, certain segments, it's very common with reefer loads, with produce. If it's peak produce season and you see a whole slew of brokers, you see 15 brokers, all known to be produce brokers, posting a load out of Florida during produce season, you know that this is probably a good load, but none of those brokers have that load locked in yet. And when you call them and they say that's all I have in it, because that's all that they have, knowing that if they go above that, they will not get the load. So that's one of those clues. And you have to decide if that's what you want to do or not. In that case, again, give them your bid. If it doesn't move, a lot of times even 10 or 15 brokers can't get it moved at that rate, and you still might be their best option, and they'll call you back. So always leave your bid.
Number 2.
Now we're getting into the stuff that's going to make you want to... Number 2. It's a negotiation tactic. Flat out, doesn't matter what the numbers are. It's just a negotiation tactic. This is where it gets to where they're flat out lying to you. And we know they're lying to you. It's a negotiation tactic. They're going to use this. Yes, they've got more money in it. They know they've got more money in it, but they're going to say this because it works. Flat out, it works. It shuts you down. What do you say? I'm sure that you've been in this conversation and they say that's all I've got in it. And immediately in your mind, a little switch will flip and you don't think you can go above that number. That tactic works. They train brokers to use that tactic. It works because Psychologically, and all negotiation is psychological. Psychologically, in everybody, even in the best negotiator, it flips a little switch. Now, there are some negotiators that know how to turn that switch back on, but most drivers, unfortunately, are on the weaker scale. And when they say that, when a broker says that's all I've got in it, that's pretty much the top dollar. And most carriers, drivers, dispatchers, that's where they stop. Yeah, it could be interpreted as lying. I interpret it as a tactic, just like any other tactic. And there'll be a lot of tactics I talk about in the future. This is just one of many. It's one tool in the toolbox. Don't get upset about it. Just recognize it for what it is and counter it. How do you counter a known tactic? Call them out. Anytime somebody is negotiating with you and they use a tactic that you identify as just a tactic, not necessarily true or false, not necessarily a pro or a con, it may or may not be something that they're trying to use for you or against you. It's just a tactic. Call them out. How do you call them out? That sounds like a tactic to me. You literally heard them say it. It literally sounds like a tactic. So you literally call them out and say, that sounds like a tactic. That's the best way to disarm a tactic. There are other ways. We'll talk about that in another episode, but call them out. Disarm that tactic.
And now, number 1.
This is the one that is the most deceiving, and it's going to take a little explanation. There are brokers you talk to, they make the sales call, and they're actually dispatching you. All the smaller brokers are like that. That's how I work. My wife and I are the only two that work at Patriot Star Logistics. We know the customer. We've been to the customer's house and had a Christmas party. We have met with them. I've driven the truck and met them on the job sites. I'm the both ends of this, right? But there are some brokers that are very distant. Some never leave their desk, right? There are some that we know they're just behind a laptop. They don't really know anything beyond the relationship they have on the phone. And then even worse than that are the mega brokers that have a sales team that work on one side of the building, or maybe not in the building at all. They're out making calls and sales calls at their customer. And then they have the dispatch team, the phone jockeys, the ones that are sitting there just pounding the phone, posting lanes, not loads. They're just trying to get as many phone calls as they can. Those are the ones that we're going to talk about here. Those are the mega brokers. They're the hardest to deal with when it comes to this situation. I'm going to take you to my screen over here. This is my TMS. Almost every TMS that has broker tools, especially the bigger systems, and this is kind of on the low end of a system. You know, like I said, it's just we're a small company. This is what we can afford, but it is a broker-centered tool. Any system like this, especially the bigger ones, even more so the proprietary ones. Obviously, I didn't write this program. I purchased this. It's a program that's out there. Thousands of people use this program, but this is not one of the biggest ones. There are much bigger ones that have even more exclusive details, exactly like I'm about to show you, like more restrictive than I'll show you. But then there are also proprietary programs that some of the mega brokers have specifically written for them. And they absolutely have this type of a thing. So this is my dispatch screen. Now this is what you would see. Now granted, I have all the permissions. I'm the admin on this because I'm the owner of the company, right? So I go in and I book a load. I built a sample load here. Picks up, I put times in, 0900, shipper 0900. Pick one in Atlanta, and then this one, midnight to midnight. First come, first serve, drop in Chicago, okay? Sample customer, All right, I've kind of been playing with this a little bit just to show you how the example works. But here's how you go do this. So let's say that I booked this load Atlanta to Chicago, and I booked this load for $2,000. Okay, so I'll click this right here. It'll bring up this screen. I'll do a flat rate, and I will put $2,000 right here. Okay, that says $2,000 flat rate. I'm going to save that. I'm going to show it at the bottom of the screen here. Okay, shows it way down here at the bottom, if you can see that. That's $2,000. When I print the invoice to the customer, it will show that $2,000 mark. I'm not trying to argue about what a good rate or a bad rate is. $2,000 is just a round number, okay? This is just a number I made up just for this example, okay? $2,000, that is what I'm going to bill the shipper, the sample customer here, okay? Now, for me, if I take a phone call, a driver calls me on this load, I know, because I built the load, it's my load, $2,000, and I can negotiate, in all fairness, full transparency, I know exactly what I've got in this load, okay? But here's where it gets tricky. This right here, dispatch pay, okay? I can click this right here, and it'll show this is the 2,000 I have in it. And this is where, if I wanted to push this out to the load board, okay, I can build the load in this system, and I can push it to all of the major load boards, okay? What do I want posted over there? Obviously, the amount that I'm billing a customer, I can't pay a carrier that. There's got to be some margin, right? So I'm going to push it out for whatever. So let's say I want to make, we'll post it with a 20% margin, and that leaves me to negotiate, you know, to 10 to 15%, okay? But what if I want to be a little bit more than that? So I got it for 2,000. Let's post it at 75%. At 1,500, okay? All right, so that is what will go to the load board, 1,500. So when you call on a load and you see 1,500 posted, that does not mean that's all they've got in it. I can make up any number that I want right here, okay? 1,500. All right, so I want a dispatcher that works for me. I don't have any dispatchers, but hypothetically speaking, I want a dispatcher that works for me to book this load, but I got to make sure that that dispatcher leaves me a minimum 10% profit, okay? So I'm going to say $1,800. I am going to make a minimum 10% profit no matter what. So I put 1,800 here, okay? So I'm going to make my $200. I'm going to save that, okay? So it still shows here, rate is 2,000. I know what I've got. Dispatch pay, $1,800, okay? If I was to create a rate confirmation, right now it would show that $1,800 if I pushed it over there. But let's close out of this, okay? I'm going to open up, I've got another profile that's a dispatcher profile. I created this just for this example. All of the permissions are limited. The only thing I can see as a dispatcher is this board right here, okay? I see this dispatch board, and all I see are these loads. Now, I built two quick little sample loads before I did this. If I was a mega broker and doing this, you know, in real time, there would literally be hundreds, if not thousands of loads here. This whole screen would be filled up. So you call and you say, I'm looking for a load out of such and such town. Let's say, okay, out of Georgia. So I can sort by state, sort by city, yada, yada, okay, alphabetical. So, I'm looking for the load out of Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta to Chicago. That's the load right there, okay? All right, so now, I'm the dispatcher now. I don't know anything about this other than what I see on this screen right here. Let me refresh this because it will show right here. Okay, this right here. So you call, and I'm going to say, okay, this load picks up on this date. I'm going to pick up 9 a.m. Let me open this. I can open up, let me view the stops real quick. Firm appointment, 9 a.m. Let me view the drop real quick. Oh, first come, first serve. Those are the information I have. Then you're going to ask me, because all carriers ask, very backwards. Carriers should never ask, but carriers always ask the broker what the broker wants to pay. Just like when you go to the grocery store, you always tell them what you're going to pay for that gallon of milk, right? The customer always sets the price, right? That's sarcasm, by the way. So we're going to look at this. and I'm going to say, in my mind, I have to negotiate. I have to make money on this. As a dispatcher, my pay is going to come out of this. I never see the actual amount. For all I know, they might only have $1,000 in the load, or $2,000, or $3,000, or $4,000, or $5,000. I have no idea. All I see is this right here, okay? So you ask me what it pays, and I'm going to look at that column and put it on the screen here, and this is what you see. $1,800. We know that there's $2,000 in the load. You saw me build the load. As the dispatcher, all I can see is $1,800. And I have to negotiate off of that number. So I might say, well, I need to move it at 15. And then you'll tell me, oh, I have it posted at, and pick up on this, by the way. I saw it posted at 17. Well, if I said it was, there's a couple of sides to this. We're going to get into that in another show as well. But you just told me what it's posted for because I didn't even know that. I don't even see what it's posted for on this screen. Remember, there might be 1,000 loads here. I don't know which one you're calling on. I'm working this whole board. So I've got $1,800. So I'm going to say 15. You said 17. I need to try to make, I've got to assume that 1,800 is literally all they've got in it, right? I don't know anymore. I've got to make money on this 1,800. I cannot pay 1,800 because then I'm breaking even. So obviously I've got a relationship with the company. I have an idea, like if I actually pay 1,800, if they're breathing down my neck, I know. But I'm going to say, okay, 1,700 is the best I can do. I know I've got 18. And if they say, oh, well, I've got to be at 2,000. 1,800 is my top. That if I do more than that, I'm losing money. That's all I've got in it. And literally, with the information that I have as a dispatcher, that's literally all I have in it. I don't know any more than that. I don't know. This is one of the reasons why a broker, when you're talking to them, will say, hold on, let me call the broker. Let me call the sales guy. Let me call the customer. Let me call, whatever it is, I have to call to check because this might be all they see. They only see this number. So, when you're negotiating and they use this line on you, now you have a pretty good idea of how to disarm them. That's all I've got in it because that's the end of this show. I hope you learned something, and we'll see you on the next one.